It was 1777. The British, under General William Howe, set out from New York City toward Maryland. George Washington came face to face with them at Brandywine Creek, but General Howe sent out a large flanking force to cross the river and hit the Continental Army from the side. After this British victory, they'd soon take Philadelphia. No, there's no reason for me to have picked the Battle of Brandywine Creek as the theme for this terrain build. I have no connection to the battle, and I'm not intending to celebrate an American defeat. But I had these beautiful models of dragoons that I had previously decided to paint up as the Queen's 16th Lancers, so I needed to retcon a bit and figure out what battle the Queen's 16th would be fighting in. And I knew I wanted a river, so I got on Wikipedia and looked for a river fight where there was the Queen's 16th Dragoons, and I came up with the Battle of Brandywine Creek, so here we are. Anyway, this is me starting off with a sheet of 2x2 XPS foam. I'm measuring it out to fit perfectly, actually, in my light box, because I knew that I wanted to film this and to photograph this, and so that's the size that I decided to make it. Pull out the Proxxon hot wire cutter, and set to work on making a perfect, it's approximately 15 inches by 12 inches board. So the original plan for this was that I was going to have a bridge and a cabin. This little cabin that I have here, but if you remember from the opening, there's no cabin in the finished product. That's because I realized that after I was designing it and building it, that there would just be no room to fit the models on if I had the cabin on there. So I designed it with the cabin in mind and with the bridge in mind, but I ended up not using the cabin. The bridge is something that I printed from my 3D printer. I got it from printablescenery.com, which is a fantastic website where I've gotten a lot of things. And printed it out, painted it up, and I'm really happy with the print. Everything that I've gotten from printablescenery.com has been really good, and no, I'm not being paid to say that. So, I'm building a small hill, and I'm going to cover this with Sculpt-A-Mold, which is my favorite product. Pour out some of this, plaster this. Now, there's a very specific reason I'm using Sculpt-A-Mold on this project. I mean, aside from the fact that it's just so darn useful for everything, but I'm going to be using water. I'm going to be pouring Woodland Scenics realistic water into it. And you're supposed to line that with plaster so that it doesn't run everywhere. And we're going to find out in the future of this video whether or not my water runs everywhere. But anyway, I'm trying to line the river with plaster, and Sculpt-A-Mold is plaster and fiber and water. So building up the riverbed, building up the hill. Trying to make it look as natural as possible. So now I've got it in. I've put on also some sand now. And now I'm going to paint the thing. Now there's some important foreshadowing going on right there with how tight that lid is. We're going to see what happens with that lid in just a minute. But, need to give it a base coat. Now this base coat is because I want it to be brown, but also because I'm going to hit it with some spray paint. And as we've seen on this channel before, you can't hit XPS foam with spray paint because it'll eat through the foam. And so I need to get a coat of this down so that I can use different colors of spray paint. I think I have 3 different colors of spray paint that I'm going to use to cover it. Now we're going to see the big problem with that stupid lid. Big old thing of paint. Get that lid on there. It won't go on. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? All down the pants. So, I've done the laundry. I have cleaned up the floor. Fortunately, it didn't get on the carpet. And I've spray painted the board with 2 colors of green and 1 color of tan. And so now we see where the road is and we see where the bridge is. And by this point, I've already decided that we're not going to be using the cabin. So now I'm fixing the bridge with just some super glue. And now I'm going to paint in the creek bed. Just using some dark brown paint. I didn't have paint that was dark enough for what I wanted. Plus, I wanted to be a little more specific than just spray canning the riverbed. I wanted it to be a specific color because I'm going to be pouring in clear resin, and I wanted to make sure that the riverbed looked like a riverbed. Now I'm going to paint in the roadway just to get some good color in there. Going to mix up a couple of different colors of tannish browns. I think that this color is English uniform and this color is German camo gray because I'm using my World War II colors. But mixing these in, ultimately that won't matter a whole lot. It matters on the grass. I wanted this to be much more natural, and that's why I'm spending so much time painting with the different colors in different places rather than using big blocks of color, because I'm going to be using static grass on this. I'm going to be using sand and rocks, and I want it all to look as natural as possible. So now comes the static grass. I'm using 2 different colors of static grass here, but it's 2mm, and this is the lighter color, and I'm going to put it in some patches, and then I'm going to put the darker color in some other patches. But I'm going to fix this down with just some Elmer's glue all with a little bit of water mixed into it to make it runny. Paint that down where I want the grass to stick. This was why I tried out my static grass applicator in the video a couple weeks ago, is because I knew this project was coming up and I wanted to figure out how that static grass applicator works so it would be perfect for using for this project. And I really love how it worked. The results were fantastic. I can't believe that I have hobbied for so long without spending the $40, I think it was, to get the actual static grass applicator. Now, if you haven't seen the video, the way that the static grass applicator works is that there's a battery in that thing, and the grass comes out through a steel grate that has a wire attached to it, and then you hold the other wire below it, and it creates this little electric charge between the steel grate and the wire that is on the base of the terrain piece, and it creates a static charge that keeps the grass so it stands straight up and looks like grass instead of looking like flock. So now I've used the 2 different colors. It has been allowed to dry, and now I'm going to vacuum up all of the loose stuff. I need to get it out of that road bed, especially not the road bed, the stream bed, because I'm going to be pouring in the water and everything that is clear is going to come up. But I also just want to clear it all out, clear up all the stuff even on the hills where the grass is, make sure that the stuff that is there is stuck down for good and it's not flaking off. So I'm adding sand here. I'm going to break out my favorite tool, which is the pipette. I got into modeling the American Revolution almost by accident. A long time ago I had bought the British and Continental starter boxes from Warlord Games, but I didn't like how fiddly the models were, and I put them in the closet mostly and forgot about them. And then I started the hobby streak. And the hobby streak, which I mentioned before, was inspired by Dana Howell. And the hobby streak is intended to create good habits in your hobbying, where you create something for at least 30 minutes a day, paint or build or assemble for at least 30 minutes a day, and then you show a picture of it on Instagram. And the point is that you're not showing off finished products. You're confident in your work in progress, and whether it is good or bad, you're just showing off, I have worked today. And I have been doing this now. I believe that by the time that I finished this project, I was on a hobby day 36. But I was running out of things to paint, and so I delved into that closet to look for more models to paint to kind of break up. I normally have been painting the bolt action World War II miniatures, and so I delved into that closet and found these American Revolution figures, and found that if I followed the instructions on putting them together, they actually weren't so awful as I previously thought they were. And so I followed the instructions, and they weren't as infuriating, and I really found that I enjoyed painting the uniforms. And now it is time to toward time to start pouring the water into the river, so I'm laying down some rocks. I want this to be nice and rocky. And I have 3 different colors of rocks, 3 different types of rocks. These are little bits of shale, but I've got some other little bits of pebbly stuff. And I'm putting them in strategic places, not only to make them look nice, but also to block the sides, because I'm really worried that this water is going to get loose, and it gets hard. It's hard as glue when it dries, the water. And so I'm building barricades right now so that I can fill up this thing with water. And now I'm going to fill it up with water. But I put the rocks in, I put the barricades in so that the water wouldn't go everywhere. And I've put it in the lid of this box so that if it does spill out, the water will just get into the box and won't go everywhere. But in a little bit of foreshadowing, does that work? No, it still got everywhere. I was not as tight in my gluing as I thought I was, and it took 2 different pours. The first pour kind of went everywhere. It leaked out all over this board. Fortunately, it's just a board of MDF that is on top of my desk. It wasn't on top of my actual desk. But it kind of glued the board down to this. Now you can see the foam is glued into the cardboard box top because of that water. So I've got to cut it away, and I've got to cut those barricades off and clean up the barricades, because now the board is looking really good. It's looking the way that it's supposed to. The water is dried and the water looks good, but now I've got to get rid of those barricades and get rid of this box top. And it is a bit of a struggle. I'm probably struggling more with that knife than I ought to. Probably being a little dangerous, so don't follow my example. But at least I'm not cutting toward myself. This time... and there it comes loose. And then it's just a matter of popping off the tops, the barricades, and trimming that foam down, trimming off any leftovers. And then I'm going to sand those barricades down, the leftover foam, sand it down, and then repaint it to match the sides of the diorama. To clean up that side, because there is a lot of super glue that is attached to that foam. And then once again pull out that awful paint that spilled all over me, and then just paint up the sides so that it matches. And that, my friends, is the end of that I'm wrong. When I based the miniatures, when I made the miniatures, I put them on bases that had grass and had these red flowers. So I've got to put some red flowers in the diorama to make sure that it fits in. And this is the final bit of the diorama project, and then we will see it in all its glory. I'm so happy with how this turned out. I mean, I've been making terrain on this channel for 6 months now, and I've made a lot of interesting stuff. But this project looks more to me like what I want my terrain to look like than a lot of the other stuff that I have built. This has a very completed, realistic look to it. The grass looks natural, the trees look natural, the water looks natural. It doesn't have that. In wargaming, there's always a trade-off between durability and realistic looking terrain. But when you're doing a diorama, you don't have to be as durable, and you can get it looking as realistic as you want to get it looking, and I'm really thrilled with this. I think that it looks great. I think that the soldiers look really good in it. Dragoons crossing that river, and the Continental Army there fending them off. This has been a project that's been in the works for about a month now, altogether, if you include the time it took to paint the models, and then the time building the piece, and including the time to print the bridge and paint the bridge. So I'm really happy with how it came out, and thank you guys for watching. Here's some final glamour shots. I appreciate you coming to this channel. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can see my pictures of my hobby streak over there. It's Robison Wells. And thank you to my patrons. Thank you to everyone who helps me out on Buy Me a Coffee. I will see you guys next week.